it's not perfect. It's not the actual distance, but the goal ahead of me is to race this event that I signed up for and to give my best effort. And if I can go into it with this attitude of, I'm going to get after it, I'm going to put out my best effort, because I never know what's going to happen. I give my best, I put forth a lot of effort, and I think this is what I had today, regardless of the distance, regardless of miles. It's you competing against yourself.
All right, man, what's happening today?
What's happening? It's your birthday.
Okay,
Before we get rolling, we'll make it short and
my
sweet. It's Mike's birthday. He turns, what, 57 today? I heard you crank up the volume as I talked about your
Sorry,
age.
I can't hear you.
Sorry. You're cutting out. You're cutting out. What was that? You wanted to...
Why is that, man?
It's, I don't know, dude. I'm not a big birthday person either. But we'll get into that in a minute.
Not
Welcome
either.
aboard. Today is October 26, 2020. It's Mike Trolley's birthday, my wonderful and spectacular co-host. This is Crushing Iron Podcast, episode 420, man.
420, man.
420. But hey, we are about as chill as you can get for a podcast, so hopefully that's fitting. But yeah, man, happy birthday.
Oh, thank you.
You got big plans for tonight?
I'm going to probably watch the World Series like I always do on my birthday. Although, I watched that a little last night.
I was going to say, you've, in usual Mike Trolley fashion, you have been very anti-sports up until the moment that it matters, and you came in Friday morning, you're like, hey, man, or Saturday, see the Badgers play? I'm like, I thought you weren't watching college football this year. You're like, I had to. I just had to bail in. So if you've listened to this podcast, as hopefully some of you have for the last 4 years, Mike does this every single year where he says he's not going to watch any Badgers basketball or football, and then he re-ups his cable subscription to like college football plus and gets like 24/7 streaming. It's not going to be fans in the stadium. I just can't get behind it. No fans in the stadium. I mean, I just can't do it. And then lo and behold, the next morning he wakes up bright and early. He shoots me and says, "Hey man, did you check the Badgers last night?" I'm like, "No, I didn't, Mike. I didn't check them at all. You told me you weren't even watching." Well, I just watched a couple plays to start the game, then I finished the whole thing out, and then I've been on the message boards for the last 3.5 hours talking about recruiting for 2024. Outside of that, no. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Again, if it's your first time listening, we appreciate you giving us your time. We know it's valuable. We know you have a lot of podcast options out there, especially in the triathlon world, but we cover both. We cover triathlon, we cover life, and all things in between. We will occasionally go in depth and do swim, bike, and run training. The specifics of the sport we'll have on guests on very random occasions. That's definitely not our shtick. We don't have a lot of guests. We just sit back, relax as best friends and co-host partners and coaches and athletes, and share our experiences with you. I've been doing this for 15 to 20 years, Mike around 10, so that's what we do. We're not experts. We are not professionals. We're just doing the deal like you are. We're trying to figure it out still as athletes, and then sometimes we'll share our experiences with our current athletes. We'll dive into our closed group, which is on Facebook. You can search Crushing Iron Group. Answer a simple question. We will let you in, and a lot of great people in there, but we'll sometimes let the individuals and athletes in there drive the podcast conversations with some Q&As. But for the most part, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about life and triathlon and everything in between. And our number one objective, since we have no sponsors and no ads, is to keep you happy and healthy and enjoy what can be a really awesome endurance sports lifestyle, and hopefully be able to do this for a long period of time, like someone as aged and as wise as Mike Trolley.
Oh, man. Can I respond to that takedown on my athletic?
I was trying to get far enough into the cast to where we didn't have to, that hopefully your memory lapsed.
I noticed that, dude. I'm a wise old man now. I get this kind of stuff.
Hey, listen, it's all fair because I turned 40 this year, and I've been getting it all. I'm just like, welcome to being old. So I'm just kind of playing it off on you.
First step, man. You'll be my age before you know it.
In 17 years.
What is it about? I mean, you said you're not a birthday guy.
I'm
not a birthday guy either. It's, but it's sort of that thing where you don't, and then it's here, and then it's like, yeah, it's kind of nice, people paying attention, but it's sort of like because I like it, but there's just no denying that you're getting older. You know what I mean?
Like, no way around it, man.
A crystallized moment in everything. It's like, man, it's coming up, and I'm like, damn, my birthday's on Monday, And then it's sort of like, I think with the move and all this weird stuff, and I guess I'm going to have to think about run camp as my birthday kind of party on some ways, because I just don't have a big social scene here yet, you know. Well, I really haven't for years, but
I was going to say, what gigantic social scene did you leave?
In that regard, it's weird because it's what we talk about all the time is really like you want to be around community, and our sport can be distancing, isolating. I hate that distancing word.
Yeah, she's isolating.
But yeah, so that can happen, and I don't know. I've been thinking about that, and you kind of like it's like I used to talk about when I worked in the news business, the on-air personality this way, and it probably wasn't the nicest thing to say, but it's sort of like I don't know, man. It's like they wanted attention so bad, so they got into news, but then they didn't actually like it when they got it. You know what I mean? It was like they were shy about it. So I kind of feel like that's how I am about my birthday. Sort of, it's like
it's ego. Your ego's like, I want you to pay attention, but I don't. It's like that.
Right? You feel uncomfortable when you get it.
It's like that analogy I use about the dance floor. You get out there and you're like dancing, but you're like, why is no one looking at me? I'm really cutting wrong. And then people stare at you like, why is everybody staring at me? It's like, no, we can't ever make up our mind. Like, do we want attention? Do we not want attention? Do you want to just kind of play it off like minimalist? I'm like, I don't really need a birthday. I'm just kind of chill. I'm doing my thing. I'm just living out my life. And then when nobody texts you, like, Jesus, like, does anybody even recognize it's my birthday today? Like, where do I fall in the place? These people's like importance. Like, give me some kind of special day. But I mean, the fact is you're going to get older tomorrow too. So it's like, it's just, it's a year. But hey, it's been a heck of a year for most athletes, especially you. You've had a lot going on this year. So, unless you get out and do something crazy tonight and have a big party that I don't know about, happy birthday. And that'll be the end of it.
All right. That sounds good to me.
Perfectly. Moving on. Some news happened over the weekend in the triathlon universe as I got bombarded with text messages on a late Friday afternoon as I'm just getting home to clock out after about 21 days straight of working. Bam. Ironman Arizona, cutting the bike course short. OMG, as I think people usually say. Firestorm. It's honestly something that I alluded to on Monday's podcast, and even I think the week before, is I had heard rumblings that the city had yet to give permits for, I think, the Bee Ridge or Beeline Parkway, whatever they call it, which is like the main drag for their 3-loop course. And so they have been kind of relegated to doing, I think it's 76 or 78 miles instead of the 112. Nothing else changes. It's still 2.4. It's obviously like 38 miles short of a bike course, and then you still run the marathon. And so when I first heard the news, I wasn't totally surprised because even 2 weeks prior to that, Ironman sent out an email to the professionals and said that they were actually going to basically take the prize money they had allotted to Arizona and dump it to Ironman Florida because they knew that race was going to happen no matter what, because Florida's just kind of like, hey, we're on the thing. Maybe we're having this. And I think what they also knew, and they probably just withheld, was that they knew that they weren't going to get a permit for the full 112, and they wanted the professional prize purse to be awarded, and you get Kona points to be at a race where they were going to have the actual full distance event. So they moved that. So it's actually $100,000 prize purse for professionals, which is like gigantic, at Ironman Florida, which is in a week from this coming Saturday. So I kind of saw it coming. I didn't know until last month. I didn't mention anything to the athletes because you don't want to do that. But I don't want to say firestorm, but there was some disappointment. And I think that's probably the direction I wanted to go with today's podcast. But my first thought was, how do we pace this? Because it's a 40 mile, let's just call it 40 miles less on the bike is a pretty big chunk that you're taking off. My first thought was like, I can get behind this distance. It's like I can be on the bike for 2 hours less, or under 2 hours, or for some people 2.5 hours less. I don't see anything wrong with that. I know they're doing their best, and I sent kind of an email out to all the athletes Friday night just to kind of get ahead of it and just said, hey, sleep on it for the weekend, because they gave you deferral options, which I thought was nice. Like if you don't want to do it, especially I think for first timers, it's probably hard to wrap your mind around because you get, and I think that's like a huge thing in our sports. Our mind gets so wrapped around this specific distance that Ironman offers. That is this legendary 2.4, 112, 26.2 that, really only equates to you actually technically being an Ironman. But then you look back at the past few years and how many races have had their swim canceled or their swim shortened. And I like to use Louisville as an example, 2.5 years ago when they shortened their swim. I think they shortened it 1.8 or 1.2 is like, are you officially an Ironman because you didn't do the distance. I'm like, listen, that day was so horrific in terms of like the wind and the cold. Like if you finished that day, then you probably had a much tougher day than people who had done like a very, very easy course under easier conditions, but just happened to do 0.6 miles more of swimming. You know what I mean? So I think it's very relative, but I think that's probably part of this thing. But the way I kind of laid it out is, and this is kind of, again, the direction I wanted to go today with the podcast was like, it's really is about you and what you want to get out of it. And in my opinion, you prepare to race. You prepare to race an event. And sometimes, as we know, events change. And I think it's about how your attitude going into it is going to affect the way that you race. So you can either defer it, you can race it. I was watching an NFL game last night, which I know you just never do. But I was watching the Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals, which actually was a fairly good game. And around the end of the first half, Russell Wilson threw a pick, Arizona in the end zone. Cornerback got it and was running back like full speed. And you're like, this guy's taking it to the house. It's going to be like I think they were already up like maybe 17-10 at that point, or maybe I think up by 7 or 10. And he's just flying. And then out of nowhere, you see this Seattle Seahawks wide receiver coming from like 20 yards away. He runs all the way down and tackles him on like the 3. Like never gave up. He just saw it happen. You could see. And I thought it was, and I'll bridge this into the topic, but when they went back and showed the replay, as soon as the pick happened, everybody basically stopped him. Was like, he's gone. Like there's no way. Head down. He's gone. Russell Wilson gave it kind of a halfway quarterback attempt. Like I'm going to jog this one out and see if I can kind of catch him. This dude, I think his last name is Metcalf. From the moment it was picked, he was like, guns blazing, I'm going to find you. And took off running, ended up tackling him on the 3, and so he obviously immediately prevented 7 points, and then the Seahawks stopped him on 4th down. So they give up 0 points. And they ended up the Seahawks actually ended up losing, but the moral of the story was like when everyone else was like, this is over, I'm just going to wait till the next play. He was like, I'm going to give my best effort. I'm going to figure a way to find this guy, and at least I'm going to give the best I have right now to see what can happen. And ended up being at that point a pretty big game changer. And I keep going back to that because that's how I feel so much about this year, when we have races that are changing, races that are getting moved last minute, distances that are getting changed, not just the distance itself, but like when you look at the Arizona bike course, not only isn't going to be like a fairly non-technical 3-loop bike course, which it has been in the past, it's now like full of U-turns, which is going to bring bike handling into it. And if you've ever ridden your bike with triathletes in the past, it's like bike handling is not necessarily everyone's forte. People are going to lose, gigantic amounts of time. So I think it really goes back to the year and racing being a privilege, which is something I noted in my email, and also just thinking like, hey, it's not perfect, it's not the actual distance, but the goal ahead of me is to race this event that I signed up for and to give my best effort. And if I can go into it with this attitude of, I'm going to get after it, I'm going to put out my best effort, because I never know what's going to happen. Going back to the interception, the guy that stopped him was like, it might not be a game changer, it might not. I could obviously just stop and walk, or I could just say defer it, or I could just go into it with a kind of a blasé attitude, or I can just say, you know what, I work my butt off, and what matters to me the most is that I go out on race day, I give my best, I put forth a lot of effort, and I think this is what I had today, regardless of the distance, regardless of miles. It's you competing against yourself. And that is, I think, something we lose sight of so much when we get wrapped up in doing distances, is that in a year like this, when all you've done is train alone, and all you've done is train, and you've barely, if ever, gotten to race at all this year, you now have an opportunity, and this goes to people who are competing in Ironman Florida and Florida 70.3 in 13 days. It's like you now have an opportunity to test yourself in a race against other people and against yourself, and there has never been a year which you should take that even less for granted than I think some people do. Is just, we have these opportunities. Don't look away from it. Get after it and still be excited. Just let it soak in. I think there's a lot of athletes that I know that are listening to this that are doing Ironman Arizona probably got punched in the gut a little bit when they read that. But it's 40 less miles. It doesn't change anything. It might change your long ride next weekend. But other than that, it's still an opportunity to race, and you can call it an Ironman, you're not calling it an Ironman, but it's still an opportunity to race and express your fitness and see how much better you've gotten over the last year.
I would like to explore something, because I got to be honest. Like when I saw that, my first instinct was like, I would have been that guy probably. I was a little upset. But I think that you've obviously evolved mentally on stuff like this Do you think that, I mean, I'm just looking back to when we first met and all that kind of stuff. If you'd have trained like a whole year and then that would have happened, what do you think your reaction would have been back then? And B, do you know what I'm talking about? As far as like, I feel like that's a good, I mean, obviously a good thing. It's
I asked
I wonder how and why we can get to that place, because it seems like over the last few years, and I don't know if this is because there's just more exposure to it, that it feels like races are getting changed and everything is going different. Like a lot of swims are canceled, obviously. I mean, that's kind of a buzzword in the industry now. A lot of things are going on. There's like all these changes and things like that. And I don't know if this has always been that way, or like I always talk about hurricanes and weather events. It feels like there's way more of them now, but maybe there was more of them back then. It's just that there's more coverage on Weather Channel, and like it's like so hype now. I don't know if it's always sort of been this way. There's always been kind of alterations in races and, you know, little cancellations here and there, but we just didn't know about maybe, or you know what I'm saying? So I'm curious about your mindset.
No, it's a great point. I mean, and I asked this question of an athlete today via Training Peaks, when this athlete was like, I shed some tears on this run, you know, with the bike course being short, and it finally got to me. And my first thought is, okay, and I think it's a good, healthy question to ask ourselves. And then I'll kind of go back to what you're referring to, you know, and how my perspective, or maybe the way I've looked at things, has changed over the last, you know, 7 to 10 years. Is what exactly is our attachment to a specific distance and a specific branded event? What do we get emotionally and mentally for our heart, for our soul, for our ego, that causes us to be so upset because of 38 less miles of a bike ride? Is it because we put in so much training and we wanted the 112? Is it because I don't think I'll be able to call myself an Ironman? Is it because I don't think I'll get the full experience? Is it because I really wanted this validation that I can do this event and I can do this distance, but I'm not going to be able to on race day? Is it because I wanted a fair comparison to the last race that I did that was an Ironman? Have I gotten any faster? Which again is still almost impossible, because every race you do is different. With terrain, with weather, with like everything is different. So it's hard to compare, but I get that part. But I think the question is like, what is our investment into this distance that makes us so emotionally distraught when we get something like minimally changed, or how much have we, the expectation over the result. And I think you see that in how fruitless it is that we invest so much mental and emotional energy in becoming this event name that's branded, and then we do it, and then you see how many people get so legit mentally and emotionally depressed when it's over with. I think that's like the best comparison I can make, is like we get caught up over this distance and that it's going to change our lives and it's going to change who we are and it's going to make our life better, and it's all we have, so we obsess about it for a whole year. And then it's over and you're like, I'm in such a funk, I don't even know what to do. Like, what is it about ourselves as humans, as triathletes, as athletes, that we obsess over this distance this is a make it or break it thing, and if we don't get it, then we're destroyed? What exactly is that? And like, I have never felt that in a race, because I haven't had anything shortened, except for the very first race that I did right after I got sober. It was in May. I went down to Gulf Coast. It was a sprint distance triathlon. I remember getting in the water the day before. I was feeling like this is gonna be a special day. Like I'm so happy to be back. It was an open water swim. I was like, it was Gulf Coast, and they had a sprint distance that day along with 70.3. And I was just thinking to myself, man, I was just not hyping it up, but I was like, this is going to be a special experience, because my life was totally different. I've been going through so much, and then I can find myself back on the race course doing something that I love, having been so far removed from it with a much clearer mind. And the day before, I remember I was somewhere in the ocean doing my practice swim, and I was like, I felt home. Like I was back. Like this feels so good. And then I woke up the next morning. And I mean, if you listen to this podcast at all, period, like, you know that swimming is my thing. I love it. Open water swimming is something I love more than anything. And I love open water ocean swims. It's like my home base. And I woke up the next morning, I walked down there, like, swim's canceled. And I was like, excuse me? That's not, this is not what I signed up for. This is not the excitement that I have. But my first thought was, well, there goes any advantage I might have, because that's all I could think of. Then I was like, okay, well, I still have the opportunity to race. I'm here for an experience. And to be frank, the experience that I get out of any race or any event or any training day is 100% on me, no matter what. As much as we like as humans and athletes and as triathletes to blame race management or the weather or whatever for adverse conditions that cause race changes or COVID or whatever it is, or city officials, like the experience itself and what you get from it is still, for the most part, 100% up to you. Because yes, are bad things going to happen? Are there going to be obstacles? Are there going to be inconveniences? Are there going to be courses that are short? And are there going to be, legs of the race that might be, totally cut out? Sure. Is there going to be less water at aid station than there probably should be? Probably. Are you going to miss a bike handoff, or is the volunteer going to take extra long getting your bike at a transition? Or is something, are you going to get your goggles kicked, going in? Or are you going to have a trouble getting your wetsuit off? Sure. No matter what you do, you're going to have something that's going to come into play that's going to cause you to have the not perfect day. You just are. But it is up to you as the athlete to think, all right, it's not perfect. How can I still make this the best experience and the best effort today to get out of it what I really want to get out of it, which is execution and effort, because that is what equals out to the experience that you have. We can't just continue to blame everyone else for it wasn't the whole thing or the had this. It's like, it's still up to you. Just like every single day you wake up, you have this plan, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I can't work out at the time I want to. I can't work out at 9. What am I going to do? Or my smart trainer's acting up and I couldn't get my bike right in, or my power pedals are dropping out, or my heart rate monitor's not working, or I went to the pool and I had to wait for 30 minutes to get in lane. It's like, it's constant like loss of perspective. And like, it really is your attitude. Going back to like the analogy we use best, is like you spill your first cup of coffee in the morning. You're like, oh, there goes the day. It's totally ruined from like the get-go. And I think that's the attitude that we can have. And I think going back to what you're asking about, previously, like maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I think a lot of it has to do with the return of expectations that we put on a race and a mileage that gives literally no shits about the way you feel. Like, I think we look at races like 70.3s and Ironmans as this, like, we are going to throw so much at it emotionally, mentally, and physically, and we're going to expect so much back from it that if it doesn't reciprocate fully, if not more than fully, then we feel slighted, or we feel let down, or we feel disappointed, or we feel like emotionally. But the fact of the matter is it's just a distance. It just is. It is strictly a distance, 2.4, 112, 26.2. You can do it at any race. You can do it any day of the week if you want to, but I think it's the name Ironman and what I think people associate that when they see NBC broadcasts or their friends ask them about that, because some people are probably honestly thinking, they're like, I told people I'm training for Ironman, now I can't say that I like really did the whole thing. So like, okay, well then do it, or try another one next year, or stay at home and do your own. Like, if it's about doing the actual distance, then do the actual distance if you want to. But the way I put it in my email, which, I think most athletes are going to continue on except for maybe one, my defer is like, I train you as a coach for the event itself. And if the event itself is 2.4, 112, 26, we prepare you for the actual event and the actual race. Once that changes, nothing else. We just continue to prepare you for the event and the race that you have. And I think, and the other thing I said was that, like, if you're going to defer to next year, if this year has taught us anything, it's like, you don't know what next year is going to be like. You don't know if it's still going to be 76 miles. You don't know if they're going to get approval. You're assuming that things are going to get back to normal. You're assuming that things are better. Go and rewind back to, the quarter of last year. If you were a person who deferred a race, who didn't, you're like, I'll just do it next year. Like, I wasn't feeling it. And then you got a hold, and this year got a hold of you, and you were like, maybe I should have just kind of raced last year, because now I'm going to go the entire year without racing, and who knows when I get to go in 2021. So I think there's a lot of things to probably unpack on that one.
Yeah, you can unpack that.
But I think it is, a lot of it has to do with like, and I think it's a healthy question to ask. It's like, why are we so emotionally invested in a specific distance, and what do we expect to actually get out of it? Is it more of a physical accomplishment, or are we expecting this mental and emotional validation or change or fulfillment from completing 112 miles on the bike, 26.2 and run, and a 2.4 mile swim. And if we don't get that 40 miles, then are we going to be totally like robbed of this mental and emotional and spiritual transformation that we have just like assumed is going to happen?
Mm-hmm. No, and I really do honestly appreciate your perspective on that. It's especially as a coach, you have to deal with what's in front of you, and you can't control that, obviously. And I start thinking about, I guess, in terms of, you know, you have what, maybe, let's just say a couple thousand people that have spent, you know, a greater part of the year or more training for a full Ironman race, and then all of a sudden it's shortened on the bike course. And I think what my point is I think the question that you ask is, I don't know the situation at Arizona, so I can't really speak to exactly what happened, but I guess you ask yourself, you know, is that we can't do it? Did they try to figure out everything? And I'm sure that's what they'll say. But to me, it just seems like, there should be a way to, you know, find 40 more miles. If that's what you do, you put on Ironman races. And I think that's the question that you want to say, hey, we've committed the whole year to it. I mean, like, imagine you trained all year for Boston Marathon. They said, we're only going to go 20. And I know that's a little bit different, but still, how could you like hang the Boston Marathon medal? And I think back to when, the only time, when I got canceled or the swim got shortened at Louisville, my thought process was like, you know, you're right though. I mean, it is your experience. I didn't feel like in the end that I didn't do an Ironman or anything like that. So let's just put that on the table. But my thought was like, oh, they're going to put us in the water for like 12 minutes, just jump off and go straight down to this thing. Why? You know, the current was obviously similar the day before. And like, for example, what I thought was like, hey, it would have been kind of cool if we would have like spun that thing around and went up to the end of the island at Louisville and maybe did like twice as far, because it would have been all downstream basically that way. Why? What kind of logistic problem would that have solved? It might have been tougher, but like, are they going all out to get everything done is my question. You know, it's sort of like, and I'm just that way. And I'm sorry, you know, that's sort of the immaturity in me that on some levels I think keeps me young, because it's sort of a fighter kind of like, did we do everything we could do to do that? And then there was another case when Chattanooga swim got canceled down here, and they had the floods and everything. And I think there was probably a lot of different things going on, like water quality and stuff like that, which I think it's just like, sometimes it's like, yeah, water's bad, we can't have it. You know, it's like easier to do that. And sometimes I think in my mind, it's like, with the swims, I think it's like easier for them to just cancel it sometimes than it is to try to figure out like how they could do it. You know, it's like, well, you know, I'm skeptic in some ways. I think about lawyers in a room going, "Wow, you should just cancel it. It'll be a lot safer. We don't have to deal with any of the shit."
I think people add two things there. I think people forget that Ironman is a business, and that they're always going to look for their best interest. That's, I mean, what all businesses do there. If they feel like they're going to put something, people more at risk, they're going to do it. And I also think that, you know, it would be interesting to see, and I have no doubt, because they have gone this entire year without putting on full distance events. They need to put one on, and I'm sure a lot of it had to do. They can only do so much with the city's allowance. I mean, I think that's the thing that people forget, and that was always enlightening to have Steve Del Monte on, and also, you know, Ken Hammond, when he would talk about how much of the race is so much on like the politics in the town and like the city officials and like what they really will allow you to do or not to do, and how much really, and that whole thing could swing on a local election. You have a governor or a mayor who's all pro triathlete and pro Ironman and pro distance, and all of a sudden they're out of office, and the next one's like, I don't care about that. So they don't renew. So it's like, it really is an interesting thing. I have no doubt that they put their best effort into having it. But I think the best example I could give or analogy to, well, first off, I think it'd be interesting to see if they could take back that email, and you got two back-to-back emails. The first one was like, we're shortening your swim from 2.4 to 1 mile. Would there be nearly as much devastation in people's emails to be like, oh, cool, just 1 mile swim, no big deal? You know, they would be like, I think there would be less of like, I think there'd be less of a distraught reaction of like, oh, I'm not getting my money's worth. It's not the full thing. But, you have the same thing here in Chattanooga and Louisville. We see people like swimming at the local hotel pool trying to get their distance because they have to do the distance. And the best analogy I could give, and this is the best year to give it, is do you think, because you're a team sports guy, the World Series, let's say the Dodgers clinch tonight.
Okay.
Do you think a single solitary player, let's say they win, they're going to rush the field, they're going to be so happy, they've just won the World Series. Do you think anyone's going to sit on the bench and be like, doesn't count, sorry?
I think somebody will.
Totally disagree. You're just saying that because that's how you are. Like, not a single person's
got the asterisk by the whole season. No,
not a single person is going to sit on the bench thinking, "Oh, this doesn't count. I'm not really excited. I'm not going to wear my ring. This doesn't count." They're going to absolutely be overjoyed that they won a championship. Same with the NBA. Same with college football. Because I think it'd be interesting to fast forward in a few months if somehow Wisconsin ends up in the college football championship game, wins the national championship. Asterisks, I think, are the most ridiculous thing in the world because you're only able to do and compete in what you have the ability to do so. And so, especially going back to college, when you're up in arms about college football not happening and these seasons being robbed from players, once you finally got a chance to be out there, I guarantee you they are giving it everything that they have to experience this for the seniors especially, or juniors who are probably going to go pro, to experience this last year to the fullest of their abilities. They're not going to say, I'm going to halfway participate because this year doesn't really count anyway because I'm not playing my full schedule and the playoffs are going to be weird, but I'm still going to kind of go through the motions. Even though this is my last year as a college football player, they're going to probably actually try even harder to get as much as they can out of it because they're being shorted. I think most of them have somewhat of a shortened season. The experience is up to you. And I think athletes can choose to have that mentality, but ultimately, I don't think you also want to look back and think 3 or 4 years from now, if you never make it to a World Series again, you never make a national championship game, you end up having a season-ending injury, life happens, and you can't ever participate in triathlon ever again, and look back and think, I probably shouldn't have had that attitude when I went into this sport or went into the training season or went into these races that I'll just do the next one or this one doesn't really matter, because you never know if it might actually, in fact, be your last one.
I mean, that's a fair point. And it's back to when I was a kid. It's sort of more like when you're a kid and you're screwing around and you might create your own little tournament in the backyard for some kind of thing or whatever. And it feels important and you go hard and it feels legit, I guess, in the way. But I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I'm sort of a pomp and circumstance guy. I love the fans. I love the pageantry of running on the field in front of 100,000 people and that whole vibe of that kind of thing. And I think, when you nowadays it's like, Wisconsin goes to play at Nebraska, which is usually a really electric stadium, and now they're going to go in there and there's not going to be a crowd. And I just don't feel like that is the same experience. So that's my whole thing. And I know that's kind of immature or whatever. I like to, it kind of bugs me, I guess. And so, I mean, and I guess since it's my birthday, I can start talking. But, I was going to say, though, back, because I grew up.
Why does it bug you?
Well, I mean, because I just feel like it's given in a little bit. That's just my thing. It's like, okay, there's not one fan in the stadium. We could have at least 10, maybe, or something like that. So, but because I was going to say, my last thing about the, did they really pull everything out to try to get that bike course the full distance? When I was growing up, we would, I remember, my dad ran a baseball stadium, and we would have Legion tournaments and things like that. Teams would come in, and then sometimes it would just rain all weekend. And I spent literally hours out there with trying to dry that field and diamond dry. We'd always get those things in. We could have easily just said, man, it just rained all day, we got to cancel this thing. But we would work extra hard to get it in. So I don't know. That's just maybe what I grew up with, their mentality on it, stuff like that. And I feel like I in a way, I'm kind of a fighter, I guess. So I just want to keep pushing for the optimum, the best thing we can do. It isn't, like I said, when I did Louisville and it got shortened, it didn't bother me. It bothered me in the moment, but then the experience was great. So your point is valid, and I'm just trying to figure out where my...
I think, can't you use the exact same mentality to participating in a race or an event that's been shortened? Are you doing everything you can do to get mentally and physically prepared to do the race that's actually in front of you? Or are you thinking, because I guess the point I'm trying to make is like, what good does it do to question, could this have happened? Because it's going to put you in a negative headspace regarding the event. All that's going to do is like give you, you're not going to be totally in. You're going to have that kind of like all the way out. Like I kind of use that. You and I have talked about this before at length, when like the week before, someone's first Ironman, you went through this, with your first one in Wisconsin. When you see an athlete sign up for their next big event, like a week or two before a big event, or one that's you're like, are you really all in? Because are you already hedging your bet to, mentally and emotionally invest in this future one? Because the mental and emotional investment is it can be so taxing. And we have done quite a few like Ironman specific podcasts, and athletes will say, or we will say, like, I think the first thing that athletes do is like they mentally and emotionally tap out. Like they're like, you know what? I've been focusing, especially for late year events like Florida, Cozumel, Arizona, even, when Louisville was the way it was in October. It's like, you've been at it all year long. Like ever since January, it's like, what are you doing this year? I'm doing Ironman. It's like, God, it's so far away. And then finally you're so focused, you're so dialed in, you're so into it. And you're like, I'm ready to be done. Like, I just want to be over. Physically, I'm okay. And I think the physical part of it, obviously, sucks the life out of you because it does drain you. But when you become so mentally and emotionally like tired, what a lot of athletes do is you look for that next little spark. You're like, oh, well, I'm no longer really that mentally and emotionally interested in Florida, Arizona, because it's kind of right here. And you know what gets me excited? That new Ironman race they just announced next May. Boom, signed it. Registration link, screenshot, posting, 2021 Ironman Tulsa. People do that all the time. And I think not everyone, I think some athletes do that to kind of hedge their emotional, mental letdown or bet. Like, oh, I've got the next one coming down the pipe. And what happens is you become distracted by the opportunity in the race at hand, which I think for some athletes alleviates the pressure and the expectation of this event that I think it's a form of self-sabotage that I think we do unconsciously or consciously.
It's not lost on me that I'm advocating excuses in a way. It's sort of like, oh, well, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's like these football players, they go out in front of no fans or whatever. They better be ready or they're going to get their block knocked off. So it's like, you have to, at some point, if you're in, you better be all in on a race, even if it's shortened. And that's exactly what happened to me at Louisville. I was very steamed for about 5 or 10 minutes. And then my head got, then I think I talked to you, and the decision, you're like, hey man, you better just go up there. And I ran up to the front and was one of the first people in the water. And then it turned out later, there's like people had to wait for like an hour and a half standing in freezing rain.
It was freezing that morning.
And it was the best decision. I was like, all right, get that out of your head and then go. And I agree with that. Once you step on the field or once you commit to something, you have to get your head in there, man. It's just that there's just no question. I guess I just want to, I like to push everything and everyone. And I wonder if like sometimes, I sort of wonder if sometimes, we don't like just give in. And I don't know.
I think this is perfectly timed. I think it's a little bit of your age showing.
It probably is, yeah.
No, I think it's true. I think sometimes you're like, I'm 40 or 57, and like there's a huge age gap.
I'm running out of time, dude.
But
we need more. We can't have any more races full distance.
But a lot of it too, to your point, is like, it's a societal thing now. Everyone is, and especially in America, it's like, everyone's afraid to get sued for everything ever, period, all the time, and that's part of it. Like, that's just something you have to kind of wrap your brain around and deal with. And if you don't want to participate in events, don't participate in events. And if you think if they're not doing a good enough job or making the course, then don't do them. But if you're going to do them and you want to get excited about it, then go all in, and be ready to, because like you said, if you're not mentally and emotionally engaged, then a 74-mile bike ride is going to eat your lunch.
No doubt.
That's, and going back to like the first thought I had, I was sitting at the kitchen table and Allie was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm trying to think about how we're going to pace this because it is such a unique distance, and and I think that's a great way to look at it is, yes, did they take away 38 miles, 100%. Is it going to be, a more difficult course? Yes, because of how many U-turns and turns. It absolutely is. So Now you go from what's always been like a 3-loop, very flat, very few turns course, very good for first-time athletes. It's like Ironman floors. Like there's not much to do. There's just like you just put your head down, you go, you turn every once in a while, and all of a sudden you're back home. You do the same course again. Now you're thinking 4 loops. So you're going to have on laps 3 and 4, you're going to have everybody on course, so much traffic. You're going to have so many turns, which is going to cause you to want to get up out of your saddle and jump out and sprint out of turns, which is going to fatigue your legs. And then you're going to think about, all right, well, now it's 112. Now I can pace it differently because, I got 38 miles left. But how differently do you pace it? Do you raise, your intensity factor goal by 0.04 or 0.08? Because if you're racing this event, or you're ever going to be in an event that has a shortened bike, I can tell you right now, this is a marathon race with a swim and a bike warm up. And then that's how every Ironman is. But even with the bike course being shortened by 38 miles, it is a marathon race. Like this is all about running and racing the marathon. And so you're going to have athletes do a couple things. You're going to have athletes absolutely. We talked about this when Ironman didn't cancel their swim 2 years ago. We were like, people are going to go out there on the bike and absolutely shred it. And you and I would sit there on the bike end when people come back, because it always gets super hot, and they start later on in the day because you have to do it now, a time trial for 2,500 people coming out out of the riverfront of Chattanooga. It's not as spaced out, so it takes them longer. So you get on the road later, and we'd see people coming in towards the front, and we'd look at them like, smoked it. We'll see them walking, at mile, the last half. And you do, because you think, oh, I've saved all this energy. I've saved, what I have, and they overbike because they think, and yes, have you saved energy? Sure. But the way I always like to explain to athletes is that, like, when you go fill up your car, it goes a little, the little dial thing goes a little bit over F, right? It goes a little bit over full, that to me, you want to start the swim when it gets back down to F. Like you've used just a very, 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 it's all about energy expenditure. You use a very, very small amount of energy. You want to start the bike with the full tank, right at the F. So you want to, but a lot of athletes, they go down, they're like already lost like, a fourth of a tank. They're down to like 3/4 left, and they're starting the bike. So you think about, okay, well, how am I going to use this energy, and when am I going to use it? Use it for the run. Especially, it's not going to be nearly as hot, hopefully, end of November as it was like 2 weeks ago. It was like 98 when they were on the run course. But you have to look at it as a different kind of, this is a different, unique distance that's going to demand something very, very different. And it's going to be interesting to watch, I think, and follow that. While the bike course is shortened, what you're going to see is you're going to see athletes who still have to swim the 2.4 miles, who a lot of athletes, to be honest, you probably aren't going to be fully prepared to swim a 2.4 mile swim because of the lack of availability to swim, or just like a lack of training. Then they're going to try and overpower their way through a 78 mile bike ride. And then they're going to be smoked when it comes down on the run. And they're going to think, why am I so smoked? I've been doing all these 6-hour, 7-hour rides and these huge long bricks. It's going to come down to pacing. And I will be totally honest. I have no idea what I'm going to decide. I was
going to ask if we could give out the
No,
secrets.
I'm not. It's not no secret. I mean, it won't be that much different to, I think, what probably a lot of people do. I'm not done, I guess, because it's not a half Ironman. It's 20 more miles, than a half, but then it's also double the run distance. So you can't attack it like a half. You kind of have to attack it somewhere in between, but then you also have to look at the athlete's strengths and weaknesses. Are they a really, really great biker, or are they a really, really good runner? Because if you look at them like, hey, you're a runner. Like, I know the lack of 40 miles sucks. It's not a 112, and you put in 5.5 hour, 5 hour, 6 hour bike rides to get ready for this 112. So, okay, you're overtrained, right? Like, you're not overtrained, but you've got plenty of fitness for 76. This now comes down to, can we run and race this marathon? Because if you can do that in an Ironman against the field, you're going to have an incredible day. And so it really comes down to, like, I was mentioning one athlete, I was like, I know this sucks, but this is good news for you, because running is your strength. And if you can just pace the bike appropriately, you can, because that's like the thing about, like, why I always kind of hate the fact the swim is 2.4 and 1.2 is it's so unevenly distributed percentage-wise of, like, how much difference it makes on a race. Like, you might take you 50 to an hour and a half for the swim, and the bike could be anywhere from 4.5 hours to 8 hours, and the run could be anywhere from 2:30, 2:45 to 7 hours. It's just a huge disparity in time that you can make up or lose. And so I think that's how you kind of like spin it, as like a different kind of challenge, and like how, can I push the limits? What do I want to do here? It's my first one. Yeah, it's kind of a bummer because it's not the full distance, full experience, but you're gonna get that in spades with all the turns that they're gonna give you. Probably have more turns. You probably have more than 38 turns, so just replace those for the miles. But it's that when I first thought, I was like, how are we gonna pace this?
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, I like that approach, and I think that's interesting. I totally agree that if you can frame it as it's just a different experience, for sure. Is Starkey racing this? I wonder what he would think about that.
I don't know. I bet he's in Florida. He'd love it probably because there's so many turns.
Oh, you think? But I mean, he would have less time to go out and crush everybody.
Yeah, he'd probably do 78 in like under 3 hours. But yeah, I mean, I think that's like a good, like, I wasn't bummed. I mean, I was kind of bummed for the athletes. I'm sure they'd be disappointed. But then my next thought was, and hopefully that's okay, how can I attack this course given this race, given now the new changes that I have to it? Instead of getting like, oh, this is so terrible, all I've been doing is this, and I have to be sticking to my 112 plan. Now it's like, all right, because I think maybe that's just the way that I'm wired, because one of my strengths, I feel like, as a problem solver like this, my mind is always working in like how to make this better, how can we do things, or there's a problem here, how do we solve it, how do we make it better? So that's my first thought, was like, that's kind of a bummer, but all right. Where do we go from here? Like, how can we, because there's still a race to run. Now. There's still a race to have. And I think that's, and to be honest with you, I think once a lot of the weekend pass are kind of on, you're like, you know what? I can kind of get behind spending, another 2 hours less on the bike, like, and making it's kind of a fun distance, to be honest with you. Like 112 miles is a long way. And I know you've been training for it. I think that's awesome. But like, to an extent, I think on race day, I don't think at like mile 76, you're gonna be like, dude, totally wish we had another 40. Like, you're going to be like, God, I'm so glad I'm getting off this bike.
It's, 76 is no joke. It's all relative.
Exactly.
It was like, if you went out and they just hammered that, that's going to, it is an interesting dilemma here.
Because the course is going to be packed. It's going to be packed with 4 loops, with 4 basically just under 20-mile loops. On laps 3 and 4, it's going to be jam packed, and it's going to be it has gone from, if you want to look back at the challenges and that different races have with distances and being cut short, and Louisville was colder and it was harder conditions, that kind of even things out. If you want to talk about energy management and what it takes to be an Ironman and what kind of athlete it makes you, but now you look at it from a fairly spaced out 3 loop, 38, 36 mile course. It's very few turns, not technical at all, spaced out well. Now you look at a under 80 mile 4 loop course with so many athletes on it and so many turns. It now goes from, it doesn't become a hilly race because there is no actual elevation, but it becomes something a lot more similar to a race with pinchers and rollers, because if you're an athlete that's going to want to pass people, you're not just going to be passing one. If you want to follow the rules and regulations and Ironman and so forth, and consider like what is considered drafting and not drafting, you can't just be hanging out. You're going to be absolutely having to push it to pass 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different people. And we all know how athletes roll. You're not going to pass 1. You're going to pass like 3 that are cycling side by side, and then you're going to say on your left. And when you say on your left triathlete, they're like, oh, I guess I should swerve left. And so they're going to swerve left, and then you're going to get upset. They're going to power from the realize you went way over your power. Then about 2 seconds later, you're going to have to come to basically a complete stop and do a U-turn. Then you're going to want to get right back up to speed and push the power to get back up to speed, therefore causing another surge. Like, it is going to be a very interesting race, because you might think, because athletes are going to obsess over miles per hour because it's shorter, it's flatter. All I want to see is a really, really fast bike split. What you're not going to see, and I promise you will see in athletes' training peaks or their cycling data after this, is you're going to see on what should have been a course with a very low variability index. So like what that means is like your average power and normalized power are very close. So like if you're on a flat course, you should be like under 1.03. So like a 200 average power and like a 202 or 203 normalized power. Everything you do is very much the same, because the normalized power is a physiological cost that's taken out of you. So you always want that to be smooth and as close as possible. But on this course, with so many surges and turns and passing people are going to want to do, you're probably going to see some much higher variability indexes and much higher normalized power than what people have prepared for, by just pedaling flat and pedaling easy all the time, doing very chill and slow things. And and what that's going to happen is you might keep your miles per hour on the bike and you might get it to where you want it to, but then around mile 14 to 15 or 16 of the run, you're going to be like, God, my legs feel like they're eaten up. Like they've gotten some chunks taken out, which is like, that's how we described courses like Louisville, and we describe courses like Wisconsin as they're just relentless. They just take little bites, like little jabs at you, body shots, as we say. And every turn is going to feel like a body shot. It's going to take, here's a surge, here's a turn, here's a pass. And the mental and emotional focus that athletes are going to have on laps 3 and 4 of doing the same lap again with so many people on course, you're going to have to be aware the entire time, which could play a role in how often you're fueling and hydrating. Because again, not every triathlete is the greatest bike handler and consumer of calories and hydration, where they're not like having a freedom to do like one-handed. It's going to be challenging. And I think, like you said, if you're going to choose to compete and choose to race, you need to be aware and dive deep into, honestly, probably this may sound weird, but probably looking at it as all the new challenges that it presents to keep you engaged mentally and emotionally as a challenge and as a really daunting endurance event, because it still is, instead of, this is shorter and therefore it's going to be easier. Because that attitude, like this is the attitude that if you've ever been in like the hospitality industry, is you walk into work and you're like, you go through like a pre-meeting, they're like, this is always a slow day. There's no one's going to come in, probably going to cut you early. And then about 45 minutes later, it's like the gates of the city open up and everyone wants to eat your restaurant. The bus shows up. Exactly. And you can't get it back because you're just mentally like, you're like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? Had you been mentally prepared, like, this is the busiest day of the year. It's like Christmas and everyone's going to show up. Everyone's doing this. You're like, all right, I'm in, I'm ready. And you can handle it. But if you have that mentality of the distance is shorter, it's not going to be as hard, it's not going to be as fun, then the first thing that kind of punches you in your mouth and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, that's not supposed to happen. That's not what I was prepared for. I didn't sign up for this. Like, so I think you look at it in that way of like, what new challenges or experiences does this now present to keep you mentally, emotionally engaged so you can end up doing what you want to do physically?
Well, you bring up a good point. I was thinking, you got a little time to figure out your strategy because you make decisions in a race anyway. And this is obviously a huge decision you're going to have to make before the race. So you got a little time to figure it out. And, if they would have said that morning, hey, we just shortened the race, that would have really been a interesting thing. But my gut tells me that I would just sort of race this with a slow build throughout and try to get to that. Sometimes how you feel at that 3-4 hour mark, you feel like you're just kind of warming up, and that'd be a nice way to kind of ride that. But like you said, I mean, if you're going to try to go with a little more effort towards the end, but the course is getting more crowded, that could be a whole different situation to deal with. So I don't know. It is an interesting thing to think about. And I'm sorry for being negative. I like to, like I said, I'm getting old and time's running out. So I want things to kind of work out. I'm being selfish.
I mean, let's hope time isn't running out that quickly. Like,
I know, but like, I think it's hard to explain. I think unless you've been there, like, I'm older than a lot of people, and people my age tend to text me after these things and say, I totally agree with you. So it's like, if you haven't been through it, you haven't been through it, and I've been through some years, and then this becomes that year where I have to deal with an injury and a lot of other crap. And then it's sort of like, man, they always say, you're just getting older, things get tougher. And I don't want to buy into that, so I try to keep a little bit of that, childhood rebellion fire going, and I don't want to just give in to everything. And although sometimes, it's a weird contradiction with me. I was actually writing a little bit about this and thinking about this as sort of like, I've got that kind of thing going on with that rebellion youth, but then I also want to be like this, just go with the flow monk guy, And it's like a really weird
combined with like the crotchety old man that's like, right, I want things to stay the way they've been.
It's true, man. I told you before I was going to write a memoir called On the Fence, because I'm like, I'm always in two different places, and should I go in there and just chill, or should I stay over here and fight? And it's a weird place, but that's just how I am. And
I think a lot of people are like that.
I think I use that, I think that is an asset if it's channeled in the right way. Yeah. It's like I can, I feel like I've told you before, sometimes before races, I can get super amped and get everything. But like right before the race, I can just like bring it back down and calm it down. And I feel more relaxed before a race usually than I do any time leading up to it. And I think that's obviously, I think it's a really good thing to be able to do. And I don't know why it happens. But I do think that a lot of times it goes the other way, or that's the, in the morning of the race or whatever, like it's here, you can't do anything about it now. So it's like, it's almost like that complete surrender. Let's just go do it. We can't change anything right now. I know that some of the greatest performances in the history of the world, like like the peak athletes can, they rise to the occasion or they crumble, and I think a lot of that's mindset. So to your point, you can't do anything about it, but you can do something about it. How are you going to attack it mentally?
You can be flexible. I mean, it all comes down to flexibility and openness, and like that's a challenge I think most endurance athletes have, is they're so rigid with everything that they do all the time that if there's the slightest bit of interruption, your heart rate monitor battery isn't working, or the ERG mode on your smart trainer is going haywire, then life is not going well. And you are unable to adapt. But that's why I said, like, you just have to be flexible, or at least work on being more flexible and open if you really want to. Because that's the thing that we forget is, like, the more rigid you are, the less opportunities you're going to have, because you limit those opportunities by how rigid you are. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. No, I'm not going to eat on that side of the river because it's too far away. And like the best restaurant ever might be just on the other side of the river, like, and I'm rigid with things too. Like, it's funny because you were joking about, like, how one minute you're like this youthful Zen soul, and the other minute you're this crotchety old man. It's like you and I go back and forth because, like, in a lot of ways, I'm a lot older than you are, in ways. True. And like, you're a night owl. I like get up early. I go to bed early. That's like, we're very different and similar in a lot of ways, but you don't have to be, but I think it's a good work in progress to be flexible and finding challenges and finding experiences and opening yourself up to more opportunities, because that's when you have more opportunities to grow and do things and kind of get out of your comfort zone. Maybe think you like things more than you did in the past. And I think that's just it's a good lesson to, for you to kind of wrap your brain around. And obviously not everyone is doing Ironman Arizona, this coming in this next month, but challenges and races and distances and things happen and change, the next minute. And while you were talking, I was thinking, like, I wonder what'll happen if, like, I haven't raced in over 2 years and I go all the way down to Galveston, and then I wake up race morning and they're like, we're cutting the race short. It's only a 1.2 mile swim and a 30-mile bike and then a 10K run or something like that. And honestly don't think that I'll be like bummed or disappointed, like, because I still get an opportunity. My first thought would be, how the hell do I pace that? Or I just kind of go for it. But it's still an opportunity to see how much better you've gotten and how you can do and execute the day, because there are challenges in everything. Not everything is easier; it just presents a different kind of challenge and different kind of experience. It's just how you wrap your brain around the approach to that. Is it a all or nothing, perfectly executed, perfectly distanced day? Or is it you did the best with what you had that day, given the circumstances, and that's really all that should matter?
Mm. What if you showed up that morning and they said the race was longer?
In what leg? Because the amount of swimming I've been doing, I wouldn't be happy if it was a longer swim, but I could probably do with the longer. My cycling's getting there, but I could probably go for a longer run. Like, I usually need more time.
What is it? Ironman Arizona is like, now the bike is 136 miles because we couldn't figure out a shorter course.
Tony, it's a great question. If they were like, listen, we worked with the city, we worked as hard as we could. Ironman Chattanooga is a perfect example. They could have made it 112, but it would have been a brutal 112 given the area and the rolling terrain and the hills.
I remember that.
But they were like, you know what? We're going to make it 116. We're going to give you 4 miles, but it's, in my opinion, one of the most it's a very fast course the way it's laid out. And so it would have been funny, interesting, like, all right, well, you can choose to do the 76-mile course because that's all we could do for it, or the next day, it still won't be 112, but in order to give you an over-deliver, it's going to be 138. What would people do? They'd be like, no. I know I'm coming something, but that's not what I signed up for. That's 20 plus miles, way too much. I'm not in. I'm doing a shorter distance. I'm going to defer it. I think it's a funny, but yet I think interesting question. Like, you know what? in order to make this bike 112, we need to end you at the totally other side of Tempe Town Lake. So the swim is no longer 2.4, but it's 3.4. Are you in? You'd be like, oh, hell no. I'm not doing an extra mile in the water. I am, in fact, going to suck it up and do the 78, just like you thought was in my best interest. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to shut my mouth and be over it. But yeah, it's funny, but it's interesting. Like,
my gut is like, give me that 3.4. That's where I went. So I think it's
a new challenge. Like, what do you? And I think the last thing, we'll close. Like, it's a new challenge because it's a new distance and you haven't done it. And there's going to, and I think therein lies like why endurance racing should be so much fun, and why every race, no matter if it's on the same day in the same venue and a year later, it's never the same, because you're never the same. And this is an opportunity to do an event that you're more than likely never going to do again at a distance that's never going to be replicated for you personally. You have no expectations, no measurement to measure it against, because you've never done the exact mileage, or you've never done a race at that length, so it's a different intensity. Go have fun with it and race with like no fear. Like you're gonna make the cutoff, you're gonna rip it. Like, have fun with it and think it's a one-off. Go for it. Like,
I love that.
What's gonna happen? Like, just rip it. I know I've done the bike work. Hopefully, rip it, see what happens, or maybe even like I might take the bike even just a little bit easier, see if I can run my best marathon ever. Like, there are so many still so many great opportunities and positives you can have from something that can be initially so disappointing.
I like that, because nobody's probably ever going to do a race this length again. Pretty good chance. I mean, exactly.
Yep. I mean, somebody right now
totally unique.
Somebody right now is printing up, whatever distance bumper sticker this is right now, so they can sell. They're already doing it. They did it for Ironman Chattanooga. They did it for Louisville. The Algae Man. Whatever. They're going to do it. So hopefully you're not disappointed. Hopefully you end up having a good experience, kind of like most of our podcasts. You might start off being disappointed, but we eventually bring it around, and hopefully you enjoyed it. As always, it's been a pleasure. We appreciate you tuning in. If you would like, and if you like the podcast and you weren't disappointed, leave us an iTunes review. It doesn't help us in terms of sponsors or ads, obviously, but does help other athletes find us, and therefore expanding our awesome community of triathletes around the world. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything, you can reach out to Mike, crushingiron@gmail.com, or you can always get a hold of me, C26coach@gmail.com. And you can also visit our one-stop shop, which is our website, C26triathlon.com, for all things coaching, camps, and community.
All right, man. As always, I enjoyed it. I appreciate it. And
go change your bedpan.
I'm cutting that out. Wait. I don't wear that. I mean, I wear what?
You wear what?
I would wear Depends probably, right?
Yeah, that's probably true.
I mean, the good news is I don't have problem really with that. So I feel like I'm pretty young.
You are. You're the youngest 57-year-old.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot. We will see you soon.